Hello. ठीक है, शुरू करते हैं क्लास। हमको रिवीजन करना है मॉडर्न इंडियन हिस्ट्री का। अगर आप क्लैट का सिलेबस देखोगे तो क्लैट के सिलेबस में इन जीके एंड करंट अफेयर्स यू विल फाइंड दैट देयर इज समथिंग कॉल्ड इंडियन हिस्ट्री एंड कल्चर। इसके अलावा आपको कुछ भी स्टैटिक नहीं करना है फ्रॉम द पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू ऑफ क्लैट। परहैप्स कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, बट अपार्ट फ्रॉम दैट देयर इज ओनली इंडियन हिस्ट्री एंड कॉन्स्टिट्यूशन, सॉरी इंडियन हिस्ट्री एंड कल्चर। और वहां से क्वेश्चन आते हैं। फॉर एग्जाम्पल इन क्लैट 2024 यू मस्ट हैव सीन देयर वाज अ क्वेश्चन रिगार्डिंग somebody called जनरल डायर एंड जालियांवाला बाग। तो इस तरह के क्वेश्चंस हमसे मिस ना हो, इसलिए हमको एक छोटा सा रिवीजन करना है। ऑब्वियसली जो डिटेल्ड क्लासेस हैं वो अलग हैं, बट दिस इज अ रिवीजन क्लास फॉर मॉडर्न हिस्ट्री। क्लैट ही नहीं, MHCET के रिवीजन में भी, MHCET के जो एग्जाम है वहां पर भी ये वीडियो आपको काम में आ सकता है। तो लेट अस स्टार्ट। हम क्या करेंगे, वी हैव स्टार्टेड somewhat unconventional way. We will try and revise modern history through governor generals and viceroys. Actually this was the original way in which they used to study history in India. So what happened was, after 1760 there were governors. After 1700 and let us say 65 there were governors of Bengal, and these people progressively became more important in the politics of India. So when the British started writing history, they made them the centerpiece of their history, right? But when our own government came, 1947 happened, or even before that, nationalist historians started writing history. What they did was, they said, okay, this is not done. What we will do is, we will write history according to our own periodization. So we, for example, see Congress from 1885, the moderate phase, the extremist phase, we have the Gandhian phase, etc., and different mass movements. But I think for remembering, even this approach is not bad. Perhaps it can help us revise in a better manner, and obviously you will provide feedback whenever this is over. So let us start. We will have perhaps 2 or 3 classes of history through which we will revise the entire history starting from 1760, let us say 1757, 1760 to 1947. Okay, so I already told you this was an approach by imperial historians. The purpose was, of course, and our purpose remains, not to eulogize the viceroys. उनकी तारीफ नहीं करनी है, हमें क्लियर करना एग्जाम। somehow we have to make sense of that huge amount of data and keep it within our mind, right? Okay, as I told you, important for CLATs as well as OLETs, and it touches on most important points in modern Indian history. So this gentleman here is Robert Clive, one of the central characters in British colonization in India, right? So what happened was, he was a noted general. He came as a clerk, but then he became a general, and such was his fame that he was created as a knight, a peer of British crown. So he was Sir Robert Clive after some time. Obviously, I'm not going to dignify him with a speech or going to justify his actions. Suffice it to say that in later period, he was in depression, committed suicide. Now, he became governor of Bengal from 1757 to 1760. So the initial administration of Bengal was done by Governor Clive. Again, he became from 1765 to 67. This was immediately after Plassey. right? So what happened was 1757 there was a battle of Plassey in which the forces of Nawab of Bengal lost. The forces of East India Company were victorious, and they took some portion of administration of Bengal in their own hands. So initially it was under Clive that administration started. Then there was a period of about 1700 and let us say 57 to 1764 in which Nawabs of Bengal retained some sort of autonomy. They had lost in Plassey, that is true. New Nawab was created called Mir Zafar, who had betrayed the old Nawab. Now this Mir Zafar, he became a sort of ATM for Clive and his friends. So they used to go to him, भैया थोड़ा पैसा खर्चा वर्चा है जो भी है, तो खर्चा पानी वो देता था, right? And even East India Company used to exploit him like that. So after some time he said, I am unable to, meet your demands. So they removed him, got another person called Mir Qasim, who was a son-in-law of Mir Jafar, right? This Mir Qasim, when he became Nawab, he realized that this is not going to be very easy for me. And what he did was, he said, let me just run away to some other place. For example, if I shift my government from here to some other place, perhaps it would be more efficient and free from British influence. So he did that. The old capital of Bengal was called Murshidabad. It was not Calcutta. Calcutta was the center of British. So the capital was Murshidabad. From Murshidabad, he shifted to Munger. Munger is in Bihar, right? Currently in Bihar. At that time, it was in Bengal, the Nawab of Bengal area. Then he said, okay, now I am here. Let me start a ordnance factory here, start manufacturing arms, and he started quarreling with the East India Company. Long story short, in 1764 there was another battle which is called Battle of Buxar, B-U-X-A-R. It is a town situated on the border of UP and Bihar. Okay. So what happened was, this Nawab Mir Qasim, he ran away from there because British were pressurizing him. He came to Awadh, which is in UP. Lucknow was the capital, Lucknow or Faizabad, and from there he got support of Nawab of Awadh. Then he got support of Mughal emperor also, who was living in Allahabad, and they met again in battle in 1764. In this battle also, the forces of Nawab of Bengal, Nawab of Awadh and Mughal emperor, they lost. And who won? British Empire. And then they said, okay, let us do a treaty. It was called Treaty of Allahabad, and who better to do the treaty than Mr. Clive? So Lord Clive went over there, did a treaty with Mughal emperor. That was in 1765, which formally gave the company some sort of authority to rule in India. Why am I saying some sort of authority? Company was not said that you are Nawabs of Bengal or you are rulers of Bengal. They said you can collect revenue of Bengal, right? So even today, who is a collector, who is a DM, who is the let us say chief authority in a district? It is the revenue collecting officer, which is district magistrate, or you can call him collector or deputy commissioner or something like that. So this person, Lord Clive, he immediately got to work, put some sort of administration there. First of all, he said, all the servants of the company will not engage in private trade. This fellow himself was engaged in private trade. What was private trade? That they shouldn't do some business while doing service under East India Company. This rule still stands. If you are a Government of India servant or a state government servant, you cannot do any private trade or private practice or any sort of private business, right? So this rule was made by Lord Clive because he wanted them to focus on the betterment of company, not themselves. Then he said, okay, payment of duties. This duties is actually a tax. This is obligatory. You have to pay the duty. It was, sort of, they were freed from this obligation under Mir Qasim. So they said, Clive said, no, you have to pay. In his time, there was a mutiny called White Mutiny in Bengal. So what is a White Mutiny? Basically, some white people, they said this is not favorable to us. We were doing very well before you came along and said all these rules. Now we don't want to accept these rules. So they mutinied. This is called a White Mutiny. There were about 2 white mutinies in India. One at this time, another one we'll talk about 100 years later it happened, right? Okay, so this happened mostly at Munger. We move forward and a bit of history about what exactly was East India Company, why were these Britishers in India, and why did they continue to come to India, and how did British became such an influential power in India. So this is a small, I think 2-minute introduction to all of this. First of all, the Portuguese came to India because they wanted to trade in 2 things. Number 1, spices. Number 2, after that they realized textiles trade is also good. So spices and textiles were 2 products of India that were very popular in Europe during medieval period. So Portuguese came to India before the Mughals came. They came to India in 1498. Everybody knows the date that Vasco da Gama came to India. Everybody also knows that Vasco da Gama, he came to Kerala, Cochin, right? And then 1510, they captured Goa, where they were entrenched till very recently, 1960s. So 1510, before any Mughal had set foot in India, Portuguese were well entrenched in India and they took control of the seas around India. So let us say we have a sort of coastline of India. Let me draw it in a better manner. Okay. So it is something like this. So Portuguese were in Goa, right? They were also in some other small places, and from here they took control of the trade, the sea trade of India. Even the Mughals had to take permits from Portuguese if they wanted to go to, let us say, Mecca for Hajj or to do any trade. So they became very powerful because they had guns on their ships, right? That was the latest technology. Then after the Portuguese became very prosperous and very rich, and then Spain became prosperous because Portugal was captured by Spain, other countries in Europe also wanted to come to India and trade, right? So starting from 17th century, 17th century by the way starts in 1600, right? 1600 to 1700. This is 17th century. So in 17th century, first the British, then the Dutch, and then the French came to India, right? By 1700, they were trading at multiple places in India. The British were, for example, in Calcutta. They were at a place called Bombay and Madras. The French were near Madras, there is a place called Pondicherry. Near Calcutta, there is a place called Chandranagar, so on and so forth, right? In Odisha, there is a place called Baleshwar. So all these places, they established their depots, sort of their godowns, where they put their money, their people, and their goods that they wanted to export or import. Now, after British, French, Dutch and Portuguese were in India, they started fighting each other. Who gets to be the boss, right? Somebody has to be the boss. Not everybody can control the sea. Somebody has to have better control of the sea. So initially, they kicked the Portuguese out of it because now they were not very powerful. What happened was 1588, there was a battle between Portugal and England in which England won. So basically, Portuguese were out of the game. It was Spain and England actually. Then the British made a deal with Dutch after fighting that you go to Indonesia, right? The Dutch were in Indonesia till 1950s. They controlled, parts of Indonesia till then. Then what remained was British and French. This was, I am talking about 1720s onwards. Now, there were 3 wars between Britain and France in India during 1740s and 1750s. Okay, and after these wars, ultimately the British emerged superior, powerful force, and the French lost all right to have any political influence in India. So apart from Pondicherry, which is near Chennai, you won't see many French places in India, right? There were, a few places, but apart from Pondicherry, there was of course Karaikal, Yanam, Mahe, which are all part of Pondicherry. But apart from that, no other place where French held much influence. The British became powerful. This happened in 1761. I am not going into details because these are not important for your preparation, CLAT preparation. For CLAT, the most important portion is Indian national movement, and it is from there you will get most of the questions if you see the past papers, and that is what we are going to focus on. Before that, we are just going to sort of skim through things, right? Then comes the era of Warren Hastings, 1772 to 1785. After Clive, after a few more people. Why Warren Hastings? Warren Hastings is one of the longest ruling governor generals in India. Warren Hastings is one of the persons who whose actual contribution is somewhat durable in India. You can see his contributions even today, I'll say that. And Warren Hastings was the first Governor General in India. Please listen to this again, Governor General in India. So what happened is there are two things. One is Governor General of Bengal, second one is Governor General of India. Warren Hastings was not Governor General of India. He was Governor General in India because he was Governor General of Bengal. He was the first person to hold that title, right? So what happened? 1772 he came to India and he said, okay, fine. One of the biggest problems I have is I don't have much revenue. The company was in dire financial straits. So what do? I increase the land revenue because I have been given the right to collect land revenue according to the Treaty of Allahabad 1765. So that he did, right? He said, okay, whoever can get me the maximum amount of revenue, I'll give him the land. I'll auction the land to him. And this was a sort of disastrous policy because after that there was a large famine in Bengal, many people died, but this policy on and off continued till 1792. What happened then we will see. He made some other things. First of all, he codified Hindu and Muslim laws, right? We have a Hindu law and a Muslim law even today. Hindu personal law, Muslim personal law. Not the same as codified by Warren Hastings, but he made the start, right? This is the first time he did. He made appointments of collectors and revenue officials. So first time administration was done on a firm basis. In 1773, you will read this in your constitution also, development of constitution. There was an act of parliament which is called Regulating Act. Parliament of what? There was no parliament in India. Parliament of Britain, right? Parliament of England. This Regulating Act created Warren Hastings. Lord Hastings is another person, right? Warren Hastings as Governor General of Bengal. 1773. He is the first person. Obviously, he had a share of issues. For example, in 1775, Maharaja Nandakumar, who was a top official of the company, he was tried and sentenced to death by Supreme Court at Calcutta, which was illegal. Later they found out it is illegal, but still they said, you have done forgery, you will be hanged to death. Then there were issues with Chet Singh of Banaras. See, British rule in India was not free from, let us say, troubles, right? So they controlled Banaras. but they wanted more money or something like that, and there was a revolt in Banaras. Even Warren Hastings was captured in Banaras. Somehow he ran away from there. They say घोड़े पे होदा हाथी पे जीन ऐसे भागा Warren Hastings. Means you have whatever you put on the horse, on the elephant, and whatever you put on the elephant, he had to put on a horse and run away. Somehow he ran away, right? So that happened in 1770s. Again, there was torture of Begums of Awadh. He wanted more and more money. See, from the very beginning, East India Company was a corrupt company. By corrupt company, I mean its servants wanted money from the people. The tradition continues in modern India, where East India Company's new form, which is Government of India, many people, many servants of Government of India, government servants, they demand bribes and receive bribes. Okay, so that tradition started during Warren Hastings and even before that, East India Company. So the mothers of Nawab of Awadh, they were tortured for money. There was a Pitt's India Act in 1784. What does it mean? You will see in your constitution class, in your polity class, not here. He is the first person who stopped pension to Mughal Emperor Shah Jahan. So what happened? 1765, there was a Treaty of Allahabad, right? We can call it Treaty of Prayagraj also. In that treaty, Mughal Emperor was to be given 26 lakh rupees as pension by East India Company, right? Obviously, they didn't pay from their own pocket. They said Awadh Nawab will pay that. 1772. By the way, why was he given pension? Because the East India Company was granted the right to collect revenue. So they said, okay, we'll not pay you that revenue, we'll pay you a pension out of that, which is certain. 1772, the Mughal Emperor Shah Alam, okay, remember his name, from 1864 to, 1764 to 1804, this guy ruled and never ruled in his own name, right? 1765, he was a pensioner of company. 1772, the Marathas attacked North India and they got him. They said, so Shah Alam said, okay, now I will be your pensioner, you take care of me. After that, 1802, East India Company again captures Delhi and captures Shah Alam. So Shah Alam says, okay, now I am your dependent, your pensioner. So basically, इसका कोई ईमान धर्म नहीं था, कोई भी आकर के इसको कंट्रोल कर रहा था. So Shah Alam, his pension was stopped by Warren Hastings. Why? Because now he was captured by the Marathas. He was no use to them. He also abolished a system called Dastak system. Now I am not going to explain this system. Just kind of try and remember this. Dastak system is actually, Dastak is a permit. Warren Hastings abolished what was called dual government in 1772. So what is a dual government? Lord Clive, when he started the administration, he said, okay, there is a Nawab who still exists and there is an East India Company. The duties of East India Company are that we will collect the revenue. The duties of Nawab are that he will do administration, protect the people. Okay. Now, Nawab doesn't have the money, the revenue. Money is with East India Company, but he has to do the work. That was the agreement. Obviously, it didn't work well. So he said, Warren Hastings said, this is not working. Let us finish this dual government and East India Company will take over the duties of Nawab also. Nawab को बोला कि तुमको भी pension दे दिया, तुम जाके कोने में आराम से बैठो. ठीक है. Later he became Nawab of Murshidabad only. So even today there are descendants of Nawab of Murshidabad, which is in India, in West Bengal. But Later on, they were not called Nawab of Bengal. They became Nawab of Murshidabad, right? This was somewhat, you can say, a deceptive move by Warren Hastings. 1772, he said, now because Nawab is no longer there, we now have to do administration. He created Diwani and Faujdari Adalat. What is a Diwani Adalat? What is a Faujdari Adalat? What we call in law civil cases are tried in Diwani Adalat. What we call in law criminal cases are tried in Faujdari Adalats, right? So these were created first by Warren Hastings. Regulating Act, I have already told you that he became the first Governor General in Bengal, and he had 4 councillors who actually were not very on very good terms with him, but all of them died or became ill or just sort of died in duels. You know, they fought each other and died. Supreme Court was also established during his period at Fort Williams in Calcutta. The fort still exists, the fort area in Calcutta, or even in Mumbai, or even in Chennai. First Anglo-Maratha War also took place during this period, 1775 to 82. Now I have already told you that Mughal emperor was captured by Marathas, right? Obviously the British were not happy about it. 1775, what happened was there was a dispute among the Marathas for throne of Peshwa. Who will become the Peshwa? The British involved themselves in that war. 6-7 years the war went on, and then they realized they cannot win the war because Marathas were too strong at that time. So they said, okay, let us do a treaty. In 1782, they did a treaty called Treaty of Salbai, and they said, now we will be friends for 20 years. This is a treaty of peace for 20 years. For 20 years, we will not attack each other. They actually did that. They managed to hold each other for 20 years, right? So 82 to 1802, there was no war with Marathas, but there was war with Rohillas in the midst, and then second Anglo-Mysore war during his time. By the way, this period 1782 to 1802 is the period when Marathas became weaker, British became stronger, and all opposition to British apart from Marathas was extinguished by them together. Okay, so Marathas and British banded together. For example, they attacked Mysore, Tipu Sultan, he was done and dusted, gone. 1799, entire kingdom went away, and it was given to Vodayars, the previous dynasty. So now Marathas actually didn't have any allies against the British, right? I mean, removing Tipu was perhaps not what they wanted, but British and they together did remove Tipu Sultan. Okay. Warren Hastings also was involved with establishment of Asiatic Society of Bengal. So William Jones was one of the judges in that Supreme Court of Judicature at Calcutta, 1784, and he was a linguist. So he came to India and noticed that Sanskrit, Greek, Latin had some common words, common roots, and he was very intrigued. So what he did was he established something called Asiatic Society of Bengal to study what is, the connection, what is India's history, and collect antiquities, etc. Even today, Asiatic Society of Bengal has a large collection of manuscripts, one of the largest in the country, right? It is functioning even today. So it has some sort of contribution to rediscovering the ancient and medieval history of India, which is often unstated, but I think this is worth stating, this is worth telling you. 1776, during his period, basically they translated Manu Smriti, right? Manu Dharma Shastra, much reviled book, but still a sort of guideline for Hindus, legal guideline for Hindus, and they said this is the Hindu law. Even today, Hindu family law is based on Manu Smriti, right? So This was translated as a code of Gentoo laws by N.B. Halhead. Sometimes they ask these things, so just kind of remember. William Jones also prepared Digest of Hindu Laws. Later it was translated by H.T. Colebrook. Charles Wilkins translated Gita and Hitopadesh, right? So there was a lot of translating activities. Obviously they were translating in English, from Sanskrit, from Persian to English. 1780, James Augustus Hickey, he started a newspaper called Calcutta Gazette, Bengal Gazette or Calcutta General Advertiser. This was the first newspaper in India, 1780. Again, another snippet you perhaps need to remember. This one perhaps not very important, but Warren Hastings established at least one educational institution, that is Calcutta Madrasa. He was a Pershophile. Pershophile means he liked Persian language, Persian customs, and because Persian was the court language of Mughals, so established Calcutta Madrasa, where they could learn Persian and whatever literature was in that language. 1785, he was impeached in House of Lords. So what is impeachment? Impeachment is a proceeding through which some high officer is removed from his office, right? For example, if you have to remove President of India from office, you will have to do an impeachment, or you have to remove any Supreme Court or High Court judges, you will have to do an impeachment. So similarly, there was impeachment proceedings against Warren Hastings, saying you have done these things. For example, you did wrong in trial of Maharaja Nand Kumar, you did wrong in Chet Singh case or Begums of Awadh case, and you have also earned a lot of money which actually was corruption money, but he was later acquitted. But there is a very interesting, this is a very interesting case file if somebody wants to read. 1786, obviously there was somebody to look after India during 1785-86, but 1786, a very interesting person comes to India, Lord Cornwallis. I am saying interesting because he was one of the noted commanders of England, noted military commanders of Britain. And in the American War of Independence, he was the chief commander of British forces. So he had to surrender USA to George Washington. After surrendering to Washington, he went to England. And England, people said he is a hero because he had fought so valiantly, so far away from home, and given a good sort of contest to George Washington. So 1780s, he was sort of looking for a job, and East India Company said, why don't you go to India, we'll create a post of Commander-in-Chief for you, combined with Governor General. So he came to India as Commander-in-Chief as well as Governor General. But during his period, curiously, he is not known much for wars. I mean, he fought a war, Anglo-Mysore War of 1790-92, which by the way he won. But he is known more for something else. He is known for stabilizing the administration of India. Okay, we'll talk about that now. 1793, he brought something of a settlement to land ownership issue in Bengal by permanent settlement. So what is a permanent settlement? He said, okay, during the period of Warren Hastings, they used to auction. Who will give the maximum money to government will give you the land, right? Now this is not going to be the case. What I'll do is, I'll make a settlement with all the landholders here, all the zamindars here. The settlement is, this is the amount the government demands, and this is what you have to pay today, next year to that, 20 years, 30 years in perpetuity. That is, this amount we will not increase. This is a permanent settlement. If this amount does not increase, it is good for you because ultimately prices will rise, right? And you will make some profit. Perhaps you will also develop the agriculture of this country. So he made a permanent settlement. The reason being he wanted a stable income for East India Company, and there was a big danger that Napoleon could attack India through Egypt in that period. So he wanted to be ready with money in that case. So permanent settlement was made 1793 by Lord Cornwallis. This is what you have to remember. He also established a police system and a civil service in India, and all that was Europeanized. What does that mean? See, even in England at that time there was no police, right? But in India he started a police system. He said there will be a circle and there will be a circle officer called Daroga, and then there will be a superintendent of police above him. So this system, followed even today, was started by Cornwallis. Very important contribution. Then he said, okay, in the civil service there will be a Tehsildar, Patwari, and above that there will be a collector. So all that he did. In the military also, he said all these posts like Havaldar, Subedar, etc. will be there, and Colonel, Lieutenant, etc. will be there. What he did was, he said any post which has a salary of more than 500 rupees per year will be reserved only for Britishers or white people. So Indians couldn't rise above the post of, let us say, Nayab Tehsildar or Tehsildar in civil administration, Daroga in police administration, and Subedar in military administration, right? So he Europeanized everything. Why did he do that? He said Indians are not very honest people, we are honest people and we can do it. And he, all jo hota na Bangla Gadi, you have to see with the police, they have a big a Bangalore, the civil service officers, all that was given by him. High salaries, it was the highest paid service in the world. This is the maximum salary you can get in the world. So it can attract bright talents. Okay. The district Faujdari Adalats, where Indian judges were there, he removed them and replaced with circuit courts where Europeans were the judge. Sadar Nizamat Adalat, it was also replaced. Cornwallis also introduced the first codified law of India called Cornwallis Code. Currently what we have is IPC, Indian Penal Code, which is perhaps soon going to be replaced with Bharatiya Danda Sanghita, a new law, right? The IPC goes back to 1860. Before that there was Cornwallis Code. So Cornwallis Code he introduced in 1790s, and this was one of the first codified laws of India. It was similar to or of a similar vintage, similar period of Napoleon Code. Okay, in Europe, Code Napoleon is still a very important law. In India, this became an important law, Cornwallis Code. So it was based on separation of powers, that judiciary cannot be the same as executive. It also had some sort of tilt towards Sharia law, right? So they said Sharia will be implemented in criminal cases, in civil cases Hindu law or Muslim law will be implemented. They codified all of that, obviously removed the cut off the hand, amputate the feet, etc. thing, but Sharia was generally retained. Okay, district judge was appointed as head of judiciary at district level, which is even today happening. 1791, during his period, a Sanskrit college was founded in Banaras by Jonathan Duncan. Next is Sir John Shore. This is after 1792. For a period of 5 years, he said, we don't have to be involved in quarrels of Indians. So Marathas will perhaps quarrel with Mysore or other kingdoms or Awadh. We don't have to do any of that. We will just sit here, do trade, because we are East India Company. We are a company, we have to make profit, right? So during Sir John Shore, they just didn't do any big battles. There was a battle of Kharda between Nizam and Marathas, but generally British were out of any military activities. There was also Charter Act of 1793. which said, okay, East India Company will get India for another 20 years. So next Charter Act will come in 1813, and some other things were also there which we'll read in polity and constitution portion, not here. So it was an uneventful period, and after that came the period of Lord Wellesley. Okay, very eventful. After uneventful period, militarily peace, now we have a militarily active period of Lord Wellesley. Wellesley, there were two Wellesleys actually. One is this guy, one is his brother. His brother later became PM of England and also one of the commanders of Indian Army. So Richard and Arthur, this one was Richard Wellesley, his brother was Arthur Wellesley. During his time, 4th Anglo-Mysore War was fought, 1799. Tipu Sultan, he lost his kingdom and his life, and ultimately Mysore kingdom was returned to Vodeyar dynasty, right? So in India, now there is only one power, and that is Marathas. We'll talk about that in a while. He described himself as Bengal tiger, and he did some more annexations. For example, in Carnatic, there was a kingdom of Tanjore. Tanjore is in Tamil Nadu. It was a Maratha kingdom founded by a brother of Chhatrapati Shivaji. Okay, so during his period, he said, no, we have to take it over. It is near Chennai. So he took over that kingdom. King of Tanjore, he was deprived of his property. Then Carnatic, there was a Nawab in Carnatic. Okay, Carnatic is basically not Karnataka but Tamil Nadu area. So entire Tamil Nadu was brought under control of British during the period of Lord Wellesley. So now in South they are the biggest power. Then he introduced a system of subsidiary alliance. What is a subsidiary alliance? Subsidiary alliance is a system in which British used to sign with native countries, native kingdoms. For example, Nizam of Hyderabad, Nawab of Awadh, different Maratha kingdoms. That from now on, the responsibility of protection of your kingdom is in the hands of the British. British तुमको protect करेंगे, तुम्हें कुछ नहीं करना है, ठीक है? You enjoy your life, don't worry about it. For protection, you have to give money, right? And secondly, for protection, you don't have to fight with anybody. You forfeit your foreign relations department to us and keep an army of British Indian soldiers in your country. So let us say Nawab of Awadh signs that particular instrument of subsidiary alliance. So Lucknow mein, there is a place called Residency. It was a fort, now destroyed fort. It's basically a large fort. In that Residency lived a few hundred or a few thousand soldiers of East India Company in the capital of Lucknow Nawab, right? So now Nawab is powerless, East India Company is all powerful. In return, he has to pay the company a lot of money also. So it's a genius scheme. First of all, they now have a number of garrisons of soldiers across India, in Lucknow, in Hyderabad, in Baroda, etc., etc. Secondly, they don't even have to pay them from their own pocket. They'll get this money from India itself, right? Genius move. So subsidiary alliance was first signed by Hyderabad, useless fellow. I mean, I have never seen any war won by Hyderabad. Then Mysore, Tanjore, Awadh, etc. they also followed in and signed this subsidiary alliance. During his period, a college was established in Calcutta called Fort William College. It is a very interesting thing actually. What happened is, Wellesley ने जो civil service बनाई थी, young people from Britain, rich people from Britain used to come to India in that civil service, but they didn't know how to speak, Hindi, for example. So what will happen? Who will teach them the languages of India, the customs of India, the religions of India? So established a college in Fort William. In one of the books, it is written that they were taught English to Hindi like this. For example, if you have to say close the door, they will say like this. Okay, just read it aloud and you will realize. There was a band crow. Darwaza, band crow. Darwaza band karo. Okay? So this is how they are taught in Hindi initially. Anyways, he also concluded a treaty of Vasai. Bassein is a place now called Vasai near Bombay with the Peshwa, Bazirao II. And there was in the aftermath a second Anglo-Maratha war 1802 to 1805 in which the Marathas were defeated one by one. So Gaikwad was defeated, the Sindhia at Gwalior was defeated. Only the Holkar remained undefeated, Holkar of Indore. That was in 1805, right? Delhi and Agra were captured during this war by Lord Lake, and I told you 1802 again Shah Alam became a pensioner of British, right? Protected by the British. In Tamil Nadu, a revolt of polygars, that is big zamindars, was also crushed during his time. In 1806, now we have a different sort of person, George Barlow. There was a Sepoy mutiny at Vellore. It was the wedding of Tipu Sultan's daughter. Vellore is a fort, so near Vellore fort they started an uprising. Obviously, they lost. At this note, I would like you to remember one thing. The oldest bank of India is called Bank of Hindustan. It doesn't exist now, of course. After that, they established Bank of Calcutta, 1806. Bank of Calcutta, Mumbai, etc. They finally merged to create Imperial Bank of India, which today is called State Bank of India. So I think that much is enough for today. Tomorrow we'll cover even a larger section. Same time, 5 o'clock we shall meet, and from 5 to 6 we'll try and have a revision of Indian history. Let me know how you like the video. Thank you. Bye-bye.